Well, hello everybody. My name is Carl Horahan here with Green Home NYC with the careers event on urban agriculture in New York City. Green Home NYC is a nonprofit, all volunteer run organization that focuses on anything sustainability related in New York City. We are the careers branch, one of three branches. We focus on people looking to either start or transfer into sustainable careers from various other different fields. And each month we host meetings on different topics. So keep an eye out on our calendar at greenhomenyc.org. The other two branches are the forums group, which is a more in-depth panel discussion about various different other businesses, technologies throughout the city, mostly, but without the career focus. And then there's also the tours group, which has tours of various different buildings or facilities, locations, parks throughout the city to highlight what they're doing in the world of sustainability. So as I said, tonight we have two speakers, Ayashima Harris from East New York Farms and Gwen Shantz from the Brooklyn Grange, both of which are in urban farming within New York City. So that's always a surprising thing for people who are unaware that it exists. So without further ado, I will let Ayashima take over with her introductions and to tell us about East New York Farms.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aishima Harris, and I'm the project director at East New York Farms. East New York Farms is a project of United Community Centers. We've been around for over 20 years. I think this year might be the 24th or 23rd. We currently operate only in East New York, Brooklyn, and we have two urban farms, which are both half acres. One of them is dedicated to supplying our farmers markets in East New York. And also the other one is a fresh food pantry distribution that serves NYCHA residents. Also, we have two community gardens. One of them, we do soil testing for community gardeners in East New York and also provide clean soil where we've partnered with DSNY, Lower East Side Ecology Center, and OER, which is a city agency, I'm forgetting their name right now, who provides us with sediment, and DSNY provides us with compost, and Lower East Side Ecology Center as well. We then blend those soil, and then we're able to test it and provide clean soil to community gardeners, because East New York is a community that has high lead toxicity in its soil. And we have a lot of community gardeners that grow their own produce as well. So we want to educate people on that and making sure that community gardeners are growing healthy food and they're also taking in healthy food as well. We also have a site that is dedicated to our youth interns and their family members so that they could also practice what they learn in our in their youth internship program, and also be able to share with their families. We currently have 30 youth interns that we work with, ages 14 through 18 years old. And some of them are also in college as well, which we call externs. Our youth interns all live in East New York. They all go to school in East New York. And one of the beautiful thing about that is that they're able to give back to their community and also be able to educate their peers and encourage other youth or their family members to join the internship as well. And it's a 9-month paid internship program that they go through with us. We currently, like I mentioned earlier, have farmers markets in East New York. We do fresh food pantry distribution. We currently have food distribution bi-weekly in East New York. We do a lot of virtual cooking demonstrations, a lot of virtual workshops because of COVID that basically teach community gardeners or people that are interested in learning about urban agriculture, different techniques that they could do within their homes or in their backyards. We do a lot of distributions like seed distribution, plant distribution that we did recently, so that we're encouraging people to grow their own food as much as possible. Um, and we're only like 9 staff members. So we do a lot, and it's 9 of us. And each of us, we all work with all the youth interns that we hire, and we all operate different portions of the project.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And then just in case if anyone didn't see the message in the chat, if anyone has any questions, please enter it in the chat and we will be sure to ask them after the prepared discussion. Gwen, if you could introduce yourself and the Brooklyn Grange, please.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Gwen Shantz. I'm a co-founder and I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Brooklyn Grange. We're an urban farming business and we have 3 rooftop farms on large roofs in Queens and 2 in Brooklyn. The smallest roof is about an acre, 40,000 square feet. And that's in Queens. Our roof in the Brooklyn Navy Yard is about an acre and a half, 65,000 square feet. And our roof in Sunset Park, Brooklyn is very large. It's over 3 acres. It's 140,000 square feet. But only about an acre and a half of that is cultivated for vegetable growing. And we have a large greenhouse on that roof as well. All of the vegetables that we grow, we sell at the farmer's market. We have a CSA program where people get a weekly bag of vegetables throughout the farming season, which is May through October. We have some partnerships with food pantries in the neighborhoods where we operate, where the food pantries get grants to purchase food from our farm. And we also sell a little bit to, on a wholesale basis, to some restaurants and Fresh Direct. So our farms, between the 3 farms we have, I'd say about 20 farmers working this time of year. But it is a seasonal lifestyle being a farmer in New York City, at least outdoors. So most of our farming jobs only go really through April, from April to October or so. And in the winter, our farm team is only about 6 or 7 people. We also have an urban landscaping and green roofing business that we operate. So we build green roofs and vegetable gardens and urban farms for people all over the city. And we employ a lot of people through that part of our business as well. That's a little less seasonal. It still is mostly, we're still mostly working in the spring, summer, and fall, but we'll be designing and building green roofs and other garden spaces in the city through the winter. And the third part of our business is an events program where we host all sorts of dinner events and weddings and fundraisers and yoga workshops, tours, all sorts of different kind of public engagement events on our rooftops because they really are very beautiful spaces and we have great views of the city. So we try to leverage that as a way to bring in additional money for our business because we're not a nonprofit, so we don't have access to most grants. We do get some grants from USDA and from some city institutions, but we can't fundraise the way a lot of urban farms can. And so most of our revenue comes from vegetable sales, building and designing landscapes, and hosting events on our roofs. And it's really interesting to hear Aishima talking about her soil and how they work with, I already forgot the acronym that you said, but it's I think it's urban remediation, maybe UER, is that right?
OER, yeah, I think it's Office of Environmental Remediation.
That's what it is, Office of Environmental Remediation. They've called us in the past and they've said, do you guys want soil? And we can't take additional soil usually because there's a limit to how much our roofs can hold. So I'm jealous of Aishima and her colleagues because they can just pile on all that compost and that good soil. But there's a lot of similarities also between what Aishima is doing and what I'm doing in that we're growing food, we're working with people and educating people and trying to make the city a greener place. But I think the major distinctions are that East New York Farms is a nonprofit, it's a community-based organization, and Brooklyn Grange is a business. So it kind of helps to give you a sense of the kind of the scope of what's happening in New York City in terms of urban agriculture.
All right, excellent, thank you. So I guess I'm sure very few people probably think of agriculture or farming as something that happens in New York City, and I imagine it's difficult to find people who have backgrounds in that already in New York City. But I'd be interested if you could talk to or explain to your backgrounds and how you became involved in urban agriculture.
So I was a youth intern. I started at the age of 14 in a youth internship program called Green Gorillas. And I just stayed connected in the urban agriculture field. I moved here at the age of 12 from Jamaica. So I feel like in our culture, community is important. And also learning from your elders and respecting them is important. And in urban agriculture, I find that I work with a lot of Caribbean elders, and that kind of made me feel like I'm home. So, and also being able to educate my peers on what urban agriculture is and trying to dismantle the notion of like farming is slavery or slave labor, kind of like empowered me to stay connected to food justice. And yeah, and I think for the past 11 years, I've been doing like a lot of different levels in food justice, where it be like advocacy for universal free school lunch, or whether it be for any social justice reform, because we're all interconnected, and trying to bridge the gap there as well. So that's how I've been like, that's my journey of being involved in this kind of work.
Yeah, I worked on a couple of farms when I grew up in Massachusetts, first and foremost. And my family, I grew up in a small town, and my family had gardens, and we had a compost. And so it was kind of part of my life always to have things growing and to be connected with food and nature in that way. And I worked a little bit on farms in college, but my entry point into this work was actually mostly through nonprofit work. And I was working for a nonprofit in New York City in an office, where I was reading and writing about the food system and the environment and sustainable agriculture. And I found it really interesting, but also very frustrating to sit at a desk and be engaged in this work. So after doing that for a couple of years, I quit, and I started working with my hands in the food business and growing food for restaurants, and ultimately starting Brooklyn Grange with some friends who had a similar kind of ambition to start an urban farming business in New York City. And yeah, to answer your question, Carl, I think a lot of urban farmers don't have official training or formal training in agriculture. We definitely have a lot of respect for people who go through agriculture programs, and we work a lot with Cornell University, and we definitely, as a business and as a farm, are engaged a lot in research, and we love kind of the academic side of agriculture. But most of us and our farmers do not have any formal education in agriculture, and most of us learned it on the job. So either at Brooklyn Grange itself or at other farms where we just jumped in and we started learning kind of on the job. And I think a lot of farmers learn that way. It's kind of a seasonal cycle. Oh, there's my son. This is Solomon. All right, please excuse us, honey. His timing is great. He could have done it when I was muted. And I noticed a couple of questions popped up in the chat that I can answer very quickly. We don't have any volunteers that work at our farm. All of our farmers are paid. And it's actually it's not legal for a business to take free volunteers or unpaid volunteers or interns. That there's labor law to protect against that. And so we have a company-wide minimum wage of $17 an hour that we actually just implemented this year, mostly in response to the social justice uprising that started last summer. And I'd also just like to echo what Aishima was saying. There's a serious and dark legacy in America of our agriculture system being based on slave labor and being based on the exploitation of workers. And we continue to see that as a major problem in our food system. A lot of the food that you buy at the grocery store, even today, is produced by people who are paid very little, like basically slave wages, or barely above that. So it's something that we try to draw attention to and to counter by paying living wages for our farmers. And it's something we'd like to increase over the coming years, because even $17 an hour is not really a living wage for a lot of New Yorkers. Sorry, I'm looking at the other questions. We don't hire temps technically. We recruit every spring. We recruit for our farmers. So we put up job postings on our website. Sometimes, a lot of times, and a lot of people this year came back from the previous season. So often it's the same workers from last year coming back. They'll go away for the winter. Some of them will go visit family. Some of them will work in other businesses. And then they'll come back in the spring and work with us for 7 to 9 months or so. And how do we manage to have enough people on our team on and off season? I think there's actually a lot of people in New York City who want urban farming jobs, and it's very competitive. So we have hundreds of people who apply for our jobs every year, and we really have our pick of people, which I think is very lucky. And it's people that are not doing this for the money. They're doing it because they love food, they love farming, and they love New York City, and they want all of it. And it's hard to find those jobs here in New York. So hopefully we can build more farms and hire more people. And by we, I mean me and Aishima and all of you guys. We've got to build more farms so we can employ all of these farmers.
All right. Let's see. So I guess next on my list of questions is, when it comes to deciding what you grow on your farms, how do you decide what you grow and like what makes a good crop for urban agriculture? And are there things that don't work because of, reasons that you might not consider if you weren't already familiar with the industry and the constraints of that come with urban agriculture?
For East New York farms, we grow mainly culturally appropriate foods for our residents. So we do surveys. We survey the markets. We also survey at our food distributions and just like ask people like, what do you want to see? We also do a lot of seed saving. So if we can't grow all the things that people want, we save the seed and distribute it to community gardeners so that they could grow it and sell it at the market as well. And most of the time we just like, for me personally, I leave it up to the farm managers because they already have a sense of what works on their site and what doesn't. I try not to micromanage a lot because it's just a lot of work to micromanage staff. So we have group meetings, team meetings, and we just talk about like things that did really well. Like, our hot peppers are amazing. So we always do a variety of hot peppers every year. We also have long beans that are also amazing, and people like come to the market and literally stock up on these produce because they're culturally relevant, and they could only find it at the farmers market because most supermarkets are not bringing that. But on the other hand, we have competition with some supermarkets where we're growing bitter melons, and then some supermarkets have bitter melons, and you're like, where are you getting that from? Like, you never used to bring this thing. But we listen to our residents a lot.
Yeah, I think our process is similar in that because we're in the city and we're directly connected to the people who are eating the food and using the food. Bye, honey. No. I'm so sorry, guys. So the vegetables that we grow really vary a lot. It's a lot of the typical stuff that you'd see at the farmer's market or in a grocery store, like kind of the American staples of like cucumbers and tomatoes and sweet peppers and things like that. But we do have this kind of ongoing conversation with the people who are buying our produce, and sometimes it's as fast as like within months of starting to sell to a certain client, we'll be growing food and harvesting it for them. And depending on the crop, there's like a really short lead time for some things like radishes or certain herbs. You can grow them and harvest them just within a month or two. So we do have this kind of ongoing conversation with our clients and the people eating the food. And it's different food. Like we're growing microgreens for Fresh Direct, and we're growing like 5 different types of tatsoi and bok choy for the Brooklyn Asian American Elders Association that we donate food to. So it's like, depending on who's eating the food, we'll grow what they're looking for and what they want. And we also, I think just after, we've been doing this for about 10 years, and every season we learn what grows well, what doesn't, what's really hard to grow and takes a lot of time, what's a little bit easier and abundant. And so every year we tweak our crop list, both to kind of best suit our clients, but also best kind of improve productivity across our farm, because we're only growing in about 12 inches of soil, and it's a pretty unique farming environment. It can be very windy on the roof, etc. So we grow things that gear towards that.
Interesting. That actually segues kind of well into my next question about what would you consider are the largest differences between urban farming and non-urban farming, if you have the experience non-urban farming, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say in our situation, it's like in many ways we're doing just the same type of growing that any small farm outside the city would be doing. So we're using the same fertilizers and the same organic pest control methods, and we're using the same drip irrigation. But for us, we have a floor under our farm. It's the roof of the building, and it's like roots cannot go any further than those 12 inches. So there's no subsoil, and it means that irrigation has to be kind of constantly running, not all day long, but like instead of like one big soak every couple of days, we have to irrigate for a quick spurt every like 12 hours or so, depending on the weather. And then also we have to trellis our plants against the wind, especially the viney stuff like tomatoes particularly. They need a lot of support on our roofs. Otherwise, it's pretty similar. And ours, I'll say, because I'm anticipating what Aishima is going to say, our soil comes from Pennsylvania. So we're bringing in like organic, clean soil from outside the city. So that's kind of unique to the rooftop farm world.
Yeah, we don't have to account for the wind. So we create our own fertilizer for the most part. So we have our own compost. We try to do the method of intercropping to control pest management on the farm. So we don't spray our crops with anything at all. In terms of like irrigation, we do have like an irrigation system, and we have a hydrant right outside. So it's easy for us to turn on the hydrant and water the entire farm if we need to. But this year we're gonna actually have like a cool system where we get underground water that we could connect directly to the pipe instead of having to turn on the hydrant. We also have a rainwater catchment system. So if there ever is a drought in New York City, we have a rainwater catchment system, which is really huge. Yeah, and I think we do, for our space, we have a ½ acre for both of our farms, and we grow in beds. So one of our farm we grow in raised beds, and the other farm we grow directly into the ground. And one of our farm is like green thumb control and register. So there's like certain logistics that we have to follow through the city in order for us to be able to maintain the space and grow in the space. The other one is just on a NYCHA property. So our permit is through the NYCHA development housing. And there's like unique things that we could do on each site. So one site might allow us to have a shed and the other site might not allow us to have a shed. And those are like different like city agencies that we have to weave our way into, and like knowing how to control the space and not break protocols. Um, our main site where we focus on production for the farmers markets, we have to also integrate that with community gardeners. So we have residents who live in the neighborhood who also grow in the space, because we're not technically a farm, we're a community garden, but we just happen to grow a majority of the space in East New York. So we have to share the space with other residents who live in East New York as well to be qualified as a green thumb gardener. Whereas our NYCHA farm, we just like grow into the space ourselves, and we just have NYCHA residents who volunteer and help us maintain the space.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's kind of highlights the differences of being on doing the same thing, similar locations, but one a couple stories up and the other's ground level. So I guess what would you consider just a standard day for, and I realize this probably varies widely depending on the staff member, but what would you say is a standard day for a, someone involved in urban farming or urban agriculture? Is there any differences between a normal job, or is it just pretty much what you would expect?
Can tell you today and yesterday, this time of year, it's not normally this hot out, but it's been so hot. It's been a very sweaty couple of days up on our farms, and because of the weather, typically our farmers will start really early in the morning. They'll be on site at 6 a.m. to try to beat the heat and get out of the sun before it's too high. Which is pretty typical for farmers around the world. I think there's a long tradition of farmers starting at sunrise and then taking a midday break. But yeah, I think it's a very physical job. That's probably the most distinctive thing about it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of bending over, a lot of lifting heavy things, a lot of shoveling soil and raking and pulling weeds and things. So it can be tough on your back and your body. And I'd say farmers are a specific type of people. They're people who like that work. They like the weather. They like the seasons. And they're also very consistent. They like to do the same thing over and over again. I'm getting bombed by my kid again. And yeah, somebody asked a question if he can farm. And the answer is no, although he has weeded for me in exchange for treats.
I would say it depends on the position in your organization. So my organization, a nonprofit organization, so your brain never shuts off, is a lot, like Gwen said, is a lot of physically constrained work, and it's also a lot of mentally constrained work. I was just talking to my farmer today while I was working alongside him planting tomatoes, and we were just like, oh my gosh, like having to, once we go home, we just have to think about what we have to do for tomorrow, what we have to do for the rest of the week, or how many emails we have to send out and follow up. So it's a lot of physically demanding work. And I would say, like, especially for this kind of job, what I've noticed is like staff persons who have children might have difficulties with that, because sometimes you might have to work long hours throughout the day just to get the job done. And sometimes you might have to like sacrifice your time to do things. For me, even on my days off, I'm working because I have other responsibilities compared to other staff. And also for all my staff members, I make sure that everyone has the opportunity to work on the farm so that they're able to provide support and also learn as they go. So you're not like sitting in the office in cool AC all the day, all the time, but you're taking your youth out to work on the farm. You're going on the farm to also help out with the farm managers as well.
All right, interesting. So what would you consider, for anyone who wasn't scared off by uh, the physical, how physically demanding farming can be, what would you say are some of the more frustrating aspects about urban farming, whether they're similar or different to standard farming?
Well, it's just a lot more working with your hands and fewer tractors, fewer, like, I think if you look at farms outside of the city, there's a lot of big machinery that's being used now, and it's a lot of automation, and you kind of can't do that on an urban scale. It's too small. And it's too, at least in our situation, it's like you simply can't get a tractor up an elevator and you can't drive one around on the roof. So that's like a big distinction for us. And I think anyone, and Aishima kind of hit the nail on the head with this. I think there's a lot of office work involved with farming as well. It's like you're running a business, you're running an organization, nonprofit, whatever it is. And so there's a finance component. There's a, in our case, there's an events component. There's a sales component. We have a full-time salesperson. We have farmers market staff. So if you want to get involved with urban farming, or really any farm inside or outside of a city, there's a lot of work that happens in an office and not in the field. There's a lot of planning and preparation and sales work. There's a lot of math. We have crazy spreadsheets and Google Docs that we use to manage our business, our crop plans, everything. It's all spreadsheets. So if you're that type of person, if you're interested in kind of project management and planning and numbers, there is a place for you on the farm as well. And a lot of our farmers kind of have both of those characteristics. They have a mind for math and a mind for nature.
Yeah, on my side, I would say one of the frustrating things that I go through every 6 months is funding. Um, funding is a pain because you're in charge of, well, for a position like mine and Gwen's, like you're in charge of paying people, whether you're nonprofit or for profit. At the end of the day, you have to be able to secure enough funds in order to pay your staff, in order to keep the program afloat. So that's the most stressful thing for me. And because I think over the years, urban agriculture have become so saturated, and not only with like land usage, you got to think about like hydroponic, aquaponic farms that are now popping up all over the city. That's also a form of urban agriculture. And majority of the big grants, the big green grants, are in favor of the STEM farming projects like aquaponic and hydroponics. So that's a little bit frustrating because a lot of community gardeners who grow on land gets left out a lot. And yeah, and to add on, like a part of my 9-month staff person, I have an administrative assistant who's great with numbers and coding. So whatever purchases that need to be made, she would do that. She would code the sheet. She would keep track of all the budgets and grants. So it's not only like going on the farm and doing a lot of like farm tasks, but there's a bunch of other things that you could put to the test. Like you could focus on policy advocacy with urban agriculture, which is very much needed because we don't have that right now. You could focus on a bunch of other things in urban agriculture, like the social aspect of it, like how can you create grants that favors the community, like being a grant writer. For example, if you're great with like words and language, like you could definitely be involved in those aspects as well.
All right. Well, yeah, and just I guess expanding on the topic of securing funding and everything. I guess how do you see city or state government making things either more difficult for you or less? Or?
On our side, there's some good new legislation that's come up recently in support of green roofs specifically. And that's not relevant to all urban agriculture, but it is good for what Brooklyn Grange does in particular, because our farms are green roofs, meaning that it's a system where you just kind of cover the whole roof with soil versus using planter boxes or pots or something. And so there's a new law that came out just about a year and a half ago called Local Law 9294. And that requires green roofs or solar panels on every new construction, every new building, including government buildings, schools, and also major renovations. So that's a big one for us. It just helps to push green roofs forward a bit, and doesn't mean that they're going to be agricultural, but the hope is that some of those, especially the ones in the schools and the government buildings, will be agricultural, and hopefully they'll be opened up to groups like East New York Farms to be able to farm on those roofs. There's also a new, there's a tax abatement in New York City, or in New York, it's a New York State tax abatement. So if you build a green roof on your building, you will get a $15 per square foot reimbursement on your construction costs in your taxes. Basically means you don't have to pay that portion of your taxes for the year. So there is some good progress when it comes to green roofs. The city, I'd say our city zoning laws are pretty good when it comes to farming. Like bees are legal, chickens are legal, farming, like growing your own vegetables in New York City and selling them wherever you want, like on your own property, is legal, which is good compared to some other cities where that kind of stuff it's highly regulated. So there's very low barrier to entry. I'd say what's missing really is funding for community gardens, funding for East New York Farms and other nonprofits. Like Aishima shouldn't have to be chasing down funding. She should just be like, the city should just pay for what she's doing because it's important to her community. It's important to the city as a whole. And every neighborhood should have something like East New York Farms. Like it's really such, if you haven't been there, it's like such an amazing institution. And it's crazy that we don't have something similar in every single part of the city, honestly. So I think like that's really where we're lacking political support, is just in allocating a certain percentage of the city budget to urban agriculture and farming and these programs. Every school should have a school garden. Every kid in the city should have a community garden they can walk to. And we're just not there yet, unfortunately.
And to add on to that too, like I would say the development of grants and the structuring of grants, I think a lot of city agency grants are unrealistic. So East New York Farms is the only nonprofit food justice organization in East New York. There's like zones in East New York that we're still not reaching because we're the only one. And it is a lot, like having team members of 9 staff and having to support them and trying to reach our goals and accomplish all the milestones that we have set for ourselves. But I do feel like there are sometimes unrealistic grants. And if like you choose to go into this field where you're like developing grants, just think about people who are on the grassroots level that's actually doing the work. Because sometimes these grants expect you to reach like 100,000 people within a month, and you're like, how am I supposed to do that with $300,000? Like, and I think it makes a lot of nonprofit organization unqualified based on those characteristics. And a lot of times you have a lot of organizations that are not necessarily nonprofit based, but like you might have hospitals or churches or I don't know, like other agencies that are applying for these grants because they could reach that target, right? But the resources is not being distributed fairly. So that's the most frustrating thing that I've seen over the years. Yeah.
All right, interesting. So I guess next, where do you see the future of urban agriculture, whether it's in New York City or the country in general or beyond? Where do you see that going? What areas do you see growing? Do you see some areas of it diminishing?
Ishima, do you want to do this one first? You're the young person. You should
Yeah.
lay out the vision.
Unfortunately, I do see it diminishing over time because based on what I've seen in urban agriculture trend is a lot of elders and there's no succession plan set in place. So a lot of times, a lot of gardens are vacant. And then over time, you don't know what goes on with that space. And community gardens are not really protected as they should on the on the property maps. So like if you're ever looking at any zoning maps, you'll see that they're being labeled as open space or open land, which a lot of real estate development agencies will like bombard community gardeners to sell their land. And it's like, it's not theirs to sell, it's the city's. But because they're not being recognized on the map, a lot of community gardeners are being bombarded, and they're elders, right? And because of the lack of a succession plan, and that also goes to like a lot of agencies that are overseeing community gardeners, um, a lot of vacancies have arisen, especially during COVID. And a lot of elders are not being welcomed into the younger generation because they feel that the younger generation are going to come in and take over. So then they're left to maintain a huge plot of land by themselves, which is unbearable and they can't manage. So my fear is that a lot of those vacant lands over time is going to become housing developments. And once that happens, then you see a lot of displacements that's taking place. So we're going to be going through the whole process of like redlining and redistricting, and it's going to be separating the community majorly. And I've seen that at my own high school when we have a farm, and the school was like, we're not going to give you funding, but we want you guys to educate and create programs. And it's like, how are we supposed to sustain ourselves? And then over time they literally um, got rid of the farm. And it really was a sad moment.
I guess
Was that at Brooklyn College? What school was that?
That was Bushwick Campus High School. That's on 400 Irvin in Bushwick.
it's just in an attempt to try and salvage a dire note, do you see any opportunity to avoid that or turn that trend around?
Yeah, I think community gardeners, there needs to be some form of grant or funding that city agencies, council members could just like give to a nonprofit organization who are working with these community gardeners to help provide them with capacity support, whether that mean like having huge volunteer days, or that mean hiring people to work with those community gardeners to maintain their space. I think and then implementing some form of law or bill to preserve open spaces such as community gardens. That would be incredible. And I feel like what makes East New York so unique is we have over 60 community gardens, and all the community gardeners know each other. They all help each other out, and they all like share information, recipes, seeds, and it's beautiful to see that. And I feel like a little bit more support and preservation for community gardens will allow for community, especially community of color, to stay intact and not be like pushed out.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's like, you'll see community gardens springing up in neighborhoods when they're in their like when they're bottoming out in terms of real estate value. And like the reason East New York has so many community gardens is because it went through a really, really low point in the, I guess, Aishima, am I wrong? Like the 80s, maybe 90s. It basically, the land value was like zero in East New York for a while, and there were a lot of vacant lots. And so the people who lived there, these elders that Aishima was talking about, came out and started farming it. They started farming this available land, and they created this beautiful thing. And now that land prices are rising there, and you've got people eyeing it as the next neighborhood for development and gentrification, the community gardens are the first thing on the chopping block. So it's really a scary thing, and there needs to be just clear, like the government needs, this is a good place for the government to step in and say, like, we are protecting these gardens and we are not going to let them go. This is one of the best things about this neighborhood. And it's just from a very cynical standpoint, it's going to increase the housing values to keep the gardens. They're such a great thing to have and to maintain. And we do need housing, like we do need development. We have a housing crisis too. We need apartments for people. So I'm not saying like we shouldn't be building stuff, but like build on the lots that haven't been turned into farms. And when you do build on that lot, put funding in to put a farm or a garden on the roof of that new building. And so that's my hope. I can't promise that this is going to happen, but my hope for New York City and for other cities is that we will maintain the community gardens that are already in existence and hopefully slate some more empty lots for community garden use or park use or other types of green spaces. And then new construction should be required to have green space on the roof, just because why not? It cleans the air. It helps to promote cleaner water and stormwater remediation. It's good for humans. Like just being around plants is good for us. It's really a healthy thing for all of us. And people can also grow some of their own food, which is definitely a win-win. So my hope is that we continue to have a growth in outdoor green space creation and urban farm creation. And at the same time, I'm also just seeing that in the kind of commercial realm, in the business world, there is a big push for indoor farming and vertical farming and aeroponics and hydroponics and aquaponics. And I think there's definitely a space for all of this. And I think it can be done in a responsible way that's not too energy intensive. Right now, the real goal for most indoor urban farm operations is to automate as much as possible. So it's basically kind of an indoor food factory where food is grown using lighting and very few humans. So that doesn't really offer a lot of opportunities for job creation, although the few jobs that are created are high tech and they're kind of more management and overseeing roles, which hopefully, but I assume would be higher paying. But that realistically, I think in New York City, the indoor rent on commercial space and even warehouse space is so high that it's hard to make the finances work for an operation like that because food is just very inexpensive. And that's a problem with our food system in general. But you see most of these indoor operations as they get to scale, they usually move out to New Jersey or to peri-urban areas where the rent is cheaper. And now with COVID, you see office prices and other indoor spaces becoming less expensive. So it could become more financially viable to grow food on a large scale inside unused office space and things like that in New York. But I think it's going to take a while for that to shake out. So we'll see whether or not that works. But regardless, I really think that urban agriculture is it's a very effective and beneficial way to activate spaces in the city. And so whatever spaces are available, if it's a rooftop or if it's a yard or a terrace, whatever it is, if you can put some plants in there, it's going to yield benefits for the people around it. So I'm obviously biased, but that's it's my hope that that's what's going to happen. Is we'll see more of that, and that's what I do for a living. I dedicate my time just to making that happen. So hopefully I will be successful in that endeavor, and all the people I work with will as well.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Also, I would highly encourage, if you guys have any free time or want to get involved in this work, just volunteer or sign up at a community garden if you haven't done so, because your help is really, really important. What I find out is that when I get a lot of volunteer on the farm, they do amazing work that we can't do because we do it every day and our body's like physically tired. And when volunteers come, they're just like, they weed out a whole entire section and we're like, what the hell just happened? Like, so we love volunteers. And I feel like at the end of the day, it feels rewarding just to know that you were a part of that process. And to be involved with this work, you have to be passionate about it. You can't expect to become a millionaire because it will never happen. You can't expect to every day go home feeling like happy, because some days you're not, because some days might be super frustrating. But at the end of the day, in order for you to be super like pumped about the kind of work in environmental agriculture, just like environmental sustainability, you have to love it.
That was a question I was going to ask later, but since you brought it up, how would you, how do we find out how to get involved, or how to find the community gardens that we could volunteer with?
I know Green Thumb, which is a part of the Parks Department, they have like a website that gives you all the information about community gardens available hours. And if you're walking past community garden, they should have a sign that will let you know like who to contact and when they're available. So that's how you could get involved. And if you see a community garden gate open, just walk in and ask questions and just like take their contact information and reach out to them. And that's how you can also get involved as well. Also take advantage of like seasonal staff opportunities, and that's something that I'm working on for East New York Farms as well too, to hire 6 seasonal staff members to help support on-site work for 12 weeks in the summertime, because that's the busiest season for all farmers and we need the support as much as possible. So taking advantage of like small internships, programs that you might like find rewarding at the end of the day.
All right, I've chewed through all of the ones that I've thought of, so we'll go through and pull out some of the unanswered questions from the audience. Let's see. So I guess this applies maybe, or applies to both of you. I'm not entirely sure how the structure is with the East New York Farms, but do you have to rent your spaces, or how do you gain access to the areas that you have to do or to start your farms?
Yeah, we have leases on our 3 roofs that we operate for ourselves. One in Long Island City, one in the Navy Yard, and one in Sunset Park. And I'll add that our Long Island City location is open every Saturday. We have open hours. You can go to our website and visit there if you're interested in checking it out. It's free and open to anyone. And then our Sunset Park location is open every Sunday, starting the last weekend in June and then through October. Same thing, just open to the public. So yeah, we lease our roofs, we rent them, and then there's a couple of farms that we operate for other people. For example, the Javits Center, we're building a farm with them currently, and they're actually paying us to operate that location for them. And that's their farm. The vegetables that we'll grow for them are their vegetables, and they will do with them what they please. So it kind of depends on the roof, but our 3 primary farms, we lease those roofs for ourselves.
We don't lease our space. It's free. We just have to apply for a permit every year. Not every year. It depends on the agency that we're working with. Green Thumb every 4 years, DOT every 2 years. NYCHA, I believe, is also every 4 years.
All right, and so I guess how how do you balance like demand for vegetables, whether that's just the community seeking them, or that's financial incentives, against the restrictions that you have in your farms, whether it's lack of soil depth, or they just take up too much space, or how do you make those decisions?
Oh,
Go ahead, jump
I was
in.
gonna
I
touch on
have
the
to think
demand.
about it anyways.
Demand for vegetables. We at our farmers market, we have farmers from New Jersey or upstate New York who come and like sell produce that we can't grow ourselves, and they tend to have an abundance of stuff anyways. And then for the culturally relevant crops that we grow, like okra, long beans, varieties of like hot peppers, seasoned peppers, callaloo, or what's the other, amaranth, that's another word for it, or Malabar spinach, like those are like high demanding crops, and garlic. So if we can't grow it, we give the seeds to community gardeners to grow it, and then they're able to sell at our farmers markets as well. And we have a thing called a share table. So community gardeners who don't produce enough produce to become vendors, we sell their share for them, and then we give them whatever they earn at the end of the market. Um, and that's how we're able to like balance demand. There's sometimes we also have to ration out some things like peppers and garlic because people will buy like 5 pounds of garlic, and our garlic is like the most expensive crop that we have at our farmers market. So we have to like literally ration our garlic for the market season, and sometimes we're telling folks like you can't get more than 1/2 pound, and they get upset, but we have to make sure that others could gain access to what we have to offer.
Yeah, our math is really based on like how much labor does it take, what does the seed cost, how long does it take to grow. So like um, certain crops like radishes or salad greens, you can plant them and harvest them within a month, and they're relatively low maintenance, and they grow really easily for us. And like salad greens are just, they sell for a lot more money and they're much more in high demand than radishes. So we grow way more square footage of salad greens than we do of radishes. But we still grow radishes. And if we could just grow salad on our whole farms, and we'd probably make more money off of our space than if we so and then doing what we do where we have a diversity of vegetables. But um, it's, if you have a farm stand at the farmers market and all you have is salad greens, the client might come up to you and buy a bag of salad greens, but they're not going to buy anything else. They're not going to buy 10 pounds of salad greens. They'll just buy 1 pound maybe. And so it's good to have like a real variety of color and flavor, both because that's what people want to see in their CSA bag, and also because it's what people are looking for at the farmers market. But it's also it's better for our soil. It's better for crop diversity. It's just better for pest management. If we have a pest one year that takes out all our salad greens and all we're growing is salad greens, then we're screwed. So it's good to have that variety and kind of hedge our bets. Plus, it just makes it more interesting for our farmers and keeps them interested and passionate about what they're doing, which is a really important part of it because their work is so hard. So we do a wide variety of stuff. It's like, and we found cutting flowers are really profitable. And I see somebody asked about cannabis. We're not planning to grow any cannabis. It's definitely, our company, our team is made up of people from all around the world and all around the country. But the ownership of our company is largely white and male and upper middle class to wealthy. So like for us to be starting a cannabis business just does not feel right, considering how many people have been incarcerated because of that plant, especially in the Black community. So we're not interested in trying to get a cannabis permit, but we know that it is a really great opportunity for a lot of people in the city to try to get permits to grow it. And we're right now talking to a couple of potential partners to do like a training program where we could help people who are trying to start their own cannabis farms and businesses learn how to grow plants in our greenhouse. But yeah, I think the plant kind of the decisions around what to grow are based not only on profitability, but it's also soil health and kind of like what makes us happy and what makes our clients happy.
All right. Well, I think that takes care of all. Just saw a question come into me directly. Do either of you see a business case for urban farming compared to rural farming and transporting it in?
Just like the savings because we're not shipping it very far.
Oh, or whatever reason there may be. I guess just reading it, that's what my interpretation of it would be. But
think it's really the marketing value more than anything, because on a rural farm you have a bigger scale, so you're filling up a bigger truck, and you're selling on a lot. It's the math. Really the math for rural farms comes down to how little you can pay your workers. In New York State, the minimum wage for farmers is much lower than the minimum wage for everybody else. So in a rural area, you can get away with paying people so little. And I think in the city, we're paying city rent, at least on the business side. I don't know about the nonprofit side, but on the business side, we are paying rent. We're paying New York City rent. We're paying New York City wages. And then like New York City water prices and electricity prices and everything, which are, it's all pretty expensive compared to rural areas. So it just means everything's more expensive. And we charge a lot for our vegetables, and our vegetables are as expensive as the most expensive vegetables at the farmer's market. But there's really a cap to what you can, like, we can't sell a head of garlic for $10. Like, nobody's going to pay that. That's crazy. I wouldn't advise anyone to pay that. So there's just, we're growing in an expensive environment, but we can't kind of sell at a price that reflects that cost. And so really for us, the value, the profitability is in the marketing, it's in the brand, and then ultimately it's in the events program, and it's in the landscaping that we do. Because the vegetables will never, you can never sell the vegetables at a cost that truly reflects their value, unfortunately.
I'm the total opposite, and I'm happy we're here. So you're able to like learn both sides. So we don't have to worry about that because we're based on grants, right? So we don't have to worry about like having to be in the black for our farmers markets or vegetable sales, because we get funding to cover staff, youth stipends, all that stuff. Our building, our office building, is owned by the organization, so we don't really pay for any like super rent or expenses like that. Like the land is free, like I said. We don't pay for the space, so we don't really necessarily have to like cover all that cost. And if we do, like, we rely on funding to cover that cost for us. For us, like, our reserve is more lower than that of a for-profit because we rely on grants so heavily and we don't price our items so high. And we also grow from a low income community. So we try to make sure that the people that live in the community could actually afford the food. So like our bunch of greens is like $2. And we haven't changed our price since 2017. And before then, the price has been changed since 2005. So the cheapest crop that we have is greens, bunch of greens, which is like $2. And the most expensive, like I mentioned earlier, is garlic, which is $5. And we do not have to factor in like labor and all the math that Gwen spoke about, because that's not something that we're not a for-profit entity. We pay our staff above minimum wage, like 20. Right now, I just gave everyone an increase, like at least $24 an hour, because we got to consider, and also our organization pay for dental and medical expenses as well. And we have to consider, like, New York is expensive, and making, I don't know, like after taxes, $1,200 biweekly, sometimes it's not feasible for people living in New York. So we try to make sure that we're compensating staff accordingly.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'd like to thank both of you for donating your time and coming to speak with everybody here. We really appreciate it from Green Home NYC. And thank you for everyone else who's attended. And Green Home NYC, as we put on events every month. This coming Wednesday, the Forums Group is having an event about the New York City Democratic primaries. Well, I guess primaries in general, and where the candidates stand on environmental issues. That is June 16th. And next month, the Careers has a event on recycling and waste management in New York City. So keep an eye out and come to our website and register for those events. Anyway, again, thank you everyone for coming, and wrap this one up a little early.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Excellent.
guys.
Really appreciate it.